In life, we all make goals, aims we want to achieve or be, whether it's fitness goals, financial goals, spiritual goals, or any other kind of goals that we make for ourselves or for others. In teaching, particularly Bible teaching, we, as teachers, make goals for our students to reach in our lessons, or we should make goals for our lessons. This brings me to number 8 of top 10 things I hate about teaching Bible. Making goals. Making goals for teaching is important. They direct everything we teach. They give both teachers and students something to achieve, and they also provide proof that we accomplished our aims. But I ask, do you know how to create a goal or goals for teaching? Let's find out. I want to play a quiz game with you all. I'm going to present some teaching goals, and I want you to tell me what is wrong with these goals. We should love Jesus more. We should love people more. By the end of this lesson, you'll explain the outline, themes, and major theological emphases of the Gospel of Luke, and you'll be able to properly apply the Gospel of Luke to your life. I'll give you 5 seconds to figure out what is wrong with these goals. Starting now. So, what's wrong with these goals? These seem like good goals that we hope our students will achieve after our lessons, right? Shouldn't students love Jesus more and love people more? Isn't explaining the outline, themes, and major theological emphases of Luke's gospel and properly applying that gospel a good thing? I agree that these are good things, but there is a problem with all of these goals. They are poor or near impossible goals for students to achieve. How do we measure whether a student achieved these goals? Do they take a test to see if they love Jesus more than before? Did they complete a survey to show they love people more? What about the last goal presented? Would any student be able to achieve all those goals in a single lesson? And how would you measure this? As a teacher, shouldn't you know if your aims were accomplished? I remember when I was teaching junior high and high school Bible at a K through 12 school, I got into a discussion with another coworker about goals for Bible teaching. He confidently said, the goal of Bible teaching should be that students love the Bible more. Later, when I reflected on what he said, I concluded this was a poor goal for Bible teaching because there's no way to measure this goal. No way to force someone to love the Bible more. The goal also is way too vague. Like, what does it mean to love the Bible more? And how is anyone going to accomplish this in a single lesson or even a semester's worth of lessons? So, what should be the goal or goals of teaching Bible? Before moving on, I do have a caveat. I want to explain what content I'm including when I say Bible teaching or teaching Bible. When I use those terms, I mean not only literally teaching the Bible, but also Christianity in general, such as history of Christianity, apologetics, ethics, spiritual formation, Christian philosophy, or anything that has Christianity at its core. I didn't want to confuse people. Anyway, back to the main topic. Why is this a problem? Creating goals can be tough work because that process touches on many areas of teaching. Like, what is the purpose of teaching? What about Christian teaching? What can students realistically gain in a lesson? Are we talking about teaching or are we talking about training? Are we trying to teach information or a skill? Also, creating goals for Bible lessons becomes complicated because it involves not only intellectual components, but there could be moral and spiritual components involved. I would think that the overall goal of Bible teaching isn't just information. There should be a moral or spiritual component involved, whether teaching morality, or providing training for skills like evangelism or apologetics, or providing a Christian perspective on things today, among many other things. I don't like making goals for teaching because this requires hard work, time, and humility. The hard work comes in with trying to figure out what you want your students to achieve, which can be really quite difficult. And it's easy to just make your lesson just an information dump. Goal setting requires time because you may have no idea where to start, and you will take time just figuring out that part. Humility, because maybe what you or I think is an important goal for students isn't important for them at all for whatever reasons. Maybe the goal is irrelevant to their lives, or maybe it simply isn't attainable for them. Perhaps you never thought of lesson goals for what you want your students to achieve. You may have to admit that your goal is awful and needs serious reevaluation. You may also realize that you are quite possibly the worst Bible teacher in human history. Your lessons are awful. Students are worse off after your lessons. And it would be better if you never taught Bible. And may Christ have mercy on your eternal soul at his second coming. Haha, just kidding. Seriously, though, as a teacher, you really must set good goals for your lessons. We should be able to create goals for our lessons quickly. So, how do we solve the problem of creating goals for our lessons? Like my previous video on lesson planning, you need to have a plan of attack when creating goals. Fortunately, there is a simple and easy solution to creating goals quickly. SMART goals. The SMART idea originally came from an article written November 1981 by George T. Doran in the magazine Management Review titled, "There's a Smart Way to Write Management Goals and Objectives." In this article, he suggests a method called SMART when creating goals. SMART is an acronym for essential traits that management goals should have. These traits include the following: specific, meaning that the goal targets a specific area for improvement; measurable, meaning the goal can be quantified or at least have an indicator of progress; assignable, the goal can be assigned to someone who will complete the goal; realistic, the results of the goal can be reasonably achieved within the current resources; time bound, the goal can be accomplished within a certain time frame. Interestingly, Doran also said that every goal does not need to meet every SMART criteria on every level of management. In addition, he suggested regular evaluation and reevaluation of these goals over time. While the original context of SMART has to do with business management, the principles of SMART can be adapted to teaching, and others have done that by changing the acronym to mean specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Specific: is the goal clear and focused? Measurable: do you have a way to find progress or achievement? Achievable: can students achieve that goal in the lesson or lessons? Relevant: is the goal relevant to the students' lives? Time bound: can the goal be achieved in the specific time frame given? Application of SMART. Now, let's apply SMART to a Bible lesson plan. That's an example. Let's say you'll teach a Sunday school class on Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. A caveat: before creating a goal, use the big idea and HBLT methods before making a goal, because the goal for a lesson should be based upon the content of your lesson. So let's apply a big idea and HBLT to this verse before making a goal. Big idea: God approves of those who make peace. HBLT. Hook: how about an activity involving asking participants what are the top 3 sources of conflicts in relationships? You can write it down on a marker board and have a discussion on this. Should take about 5 or 10 minutes. Book. So a good first place to start would be the context of the passage. So as we can see, this passage is within the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus speaks to his disciples, but also the crowds. So there are 2 audiences with this message: the disciples and the crowds. Next up, let's do a word study on this passage. Let's look for some important words that can help us determine the meaning of this passage. First, let's go to the word sons. Now, sons can mean literal biological sons, but the word son can also be used to describe a personality trait or characterized by. Next, let's look at the word blessed. Now, blessed can mean in certain contexts happy, but it can also mean approved of. Next, let's also look at the word peacemakers. Now, peacemakers is an interesting word because it's only used once in the entire New Testament as a noun. Interestingly, though, the verb form occurs in Colossians 1:20, which describes Jesus as making peace through his death and reconciling the world. Another point that we should consider is Jesus' behavior in Matthew. Now, I'm going off the assumption that Jesus' behavior reflects the Sermon on the Mount. Now, if we look at that, we do see a couple interesting things. One, Jesus got confrontational with his opponents. And next, he never shied away from conflict, but was willing to confront people about their sin. Now, is there anything else that can help us with determining what is a peacemaker according to Matthew 5:9? Well, I have an interesting idea. You may agree with it, or you may disagree with it, but I believe that the Beatitudes are actually something like a Ten Commandments, and that most of the sermon is actually the practical application of those Beatitudes. Let's take a look at the Sermon on the Mount and see if we can find anything that would be the practical application of being a peacemaker. Well, I think for one, reconciling with an angry brother would be one. How about turning the other cheek? Or enemy love? Or forgiving others and asking for forgiveness in the Lord's Prayer? I think these actually will help us determine what exactly is a peacemaker in Matthew 5:9. So, taking all these factors into consideration, what exactly does it mean to be a peacemaker? Well, it doesn't mean that you avoid conflict. It doesn't mean that you don't get into conflict. But at least in the context of the Bible, it has to do with reconciling with others. It has to do with forgiveness. It has to do with enemy love. And it has to do with turning the cheek. Which in this context, by the way, doesn't mean you let somebody slap you in the face. I would take this more as not trading of insults. Now on to look. So how do we practically apply Matthew 5:9? Well, as far as being a peacemaker goes, we forgive others, and we also ask for forgiveness. We don't trade insults with others. We love our enemies, and we reconcile relationships. I do need to add one other note. When I talk about enemy love, I'm not talking about the emotion love. In the context of Matthew, it refers to praying for one's enemies. So I just want to let everybody know that enemy love does not have to do anything about letting people abuse you or take advantage of you or anything like that. So just keep that in mind when I say enemy love. I mean, in this context here, we praying for your enemies. Now let's talk about took, or how our students can apply Matthew 5:9. Just some ideas, you could ask students, is there anyone in your life that needs reconciliation? Do you need to forgive someone? Or maybe you need to ask for forgiveness. Is there anybody out there you need to pray for, even people that you don't like? What about insulting? Are the people you need to just simply stop insulting? What about in your family life, your work life, your friend's life, church life, or any other life? Now that we've got the big idea and HBLT down, let's figure out our goal for this lesson. How do we do this? First, write out what you want your students to accomplish at the end of the lesson. Second, compare the SMART acronym to your goal and see if your goal meets the 5 criteria of SMART. Here's my goal for Matthew 5:9. Students will understand, explain, and practically apply biblical peacemaking as shown in Matthew 5:9. Admittedly, This may be considered three separate goals. Let's see if this is a SMART goal now. Is my goal specific? Yes. We focus on a particular verse. Matthew 5:9. Is my goal measurable? Yes. We can do this by giving students a survey, give them a test. We can do verbal feedback, like ask students about the lesson. Is the goal attainable? Yes. I would say those goals can be achieved by students. Is it relevant? Yes. Relationships will inevitably involve conflict, and students need to know how to resolve those. Is it time bound? Yes. I would say this can be accomplished in a single 50-minute lesson. I do want to add one caveat. The number of goals should be kept to a minimum to ensure that they can be reached. If possible, make no more than 3 goals, and less is better. Let me explain. I remember when I was in community college for my associate's in software development degree. I took a class on database development. The professor who taught the class knew database development very well, was very passionate about the field, and she's told students what learning objectives she wanted students to achieve in each lesson. However, the part where she told students about the learning objectives usually numbered close to 10 of those objectives. Now I ask, how can a person with average intelligence achieve all 10 learning objectives in a single 2-hour lesson? Unless someone has an IQ of 150 and a photographic memory, that just isn't happening. Personally, I might have gotten 2 out of those 10 objectives in our lessons. Maybe. The point stays true. Keep your goal numbers to a minimum. Another caveat. It took me under 90 minutes to come up with a big idea, HBLT, and SMART goal for this lesson. Considering that I planned this out impromptu while making this video, I think that's pretty impressive. Give the methods I showed you all a chance. It'll change your teaching. Maybe even change your life. Actually, sorry about this, but I do need to bring up one more point. You may disagree with my interpretation of Matthew 5:9. That is no problem. My focus for this video is on teaching methods, not biblical interpretation. If you agree or disagree on my interpretation, let me know in the comments, and I would be happy to have a discussion on that. What do you all think? Is my solution good? Is it bad? Do you have other ideas on making goals? Let me know in the YouTube comments. If you like what you saw and heard, then give a thumbs up and subscribe. Or if you didn't like it, then give me a thumbs down. Either way, I thank you for watching. And until the next video, stay theological.